I'm able to still sparkle and share all my glitter, my mental health magic, as well as
Yes.
shine in the midst of it. And I'm so grateful that I don't look like what I've been through, So that's my power.
Welcome to the place where we hear empowering stories of transformation and then we turn that into art that reminds us to be great. I am your host and artist, Jessica James, and this is the I Empower podcast. Thank you so much, Alexia, for being with me today. I am over the moon excited to talk to you about what you're doing and your incredible story and how you found your power through the many things that you've been through recently. I always like to tell my listeners and my viewers and my followers where I find my guests. And we actually connected on Instagram through a mutual friend that we have, Miss Sheena. And so I am so thankful for that. She has tagged you in one of my posts and you reached out and I was like, let's do it. And we had the opportunity to speak before going on the air. And I got a little bit of insight of your incredible story. And I'm really excited to share it with my listeners. So thank you for being on here today. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Alexia Mitchell, and I am the owner and founder of Reset and Heal. And I am a therapist, and I am so overwhelmed and glad to be here today. Thank you for having me, Jessica.
Yay. All right. And so you have a very touching story. I think just about everybody has a very unique experience with the pandemic and everything that has went on in the past 2 years. But you have a very touching story that led you into where you are today with the business that you have. Can you share with us a little bit of your experience and how that put you in the path to being where you are today?
So in December of 2020, around the middle part of December, my mother, she contracted COVID. And 2 months prior to that, her father passed away from COVID. And we have a pretty tight-knit family. So that was a major hit for us when my grandfather passed. And then in December, she caught COVID. And that was very, I remember taking her to the hospital, and I was just it was almost like my body was preparing me for what was to come, but I didn't really realize it. But I was very emotional when I took her to the hospital. And they released her from the hospital. They diagnosed her with COVID. And she, fought all the way through. And then one morning, Christmas Day was the last day I seen my mom. I had went over to give her and my brother Christmas dinner. I had fixed Christmas dinner for everybody, and she couldn't, come out and everything like that because she was still in quarantine. And I seen her Christmas Day, and she was able to get up and answer the door for me. And we had, conversations, and she felt bad that she wasn't able to, do Christmas as we normally would. And 2 days later, on the 26th, I talked to her, and she said she wasn't feeling well. But then on the 27th, I hadn't heard from her all day. And it wasn't abnormal because I knew she was sick and she probably was resting. But around 1:30, when I got a call from my grandmother indicating that she hadn't spoken to her, and for me to call, and I did, and I still hadn't heard from her. Well, fast forward, I had a friend or a neighbor to go over to her house, and we discovered that she had transitioned at 55 from COVID. And at that immediate moment of shock and fear and grief and everything that comes along with finding out that your best friend in the whole world, besides my husband, was no longer here. And I had, at that time, he was 24. I had a 24-year-old special needs brother. Well, I have a special needs brother that I had to then assume guardianship for because I knew that I could not allow him to go to the state or anything like that. He was my mother's heart, and that's what she referred to him as, her heart. And he was there with her when she transitioned, but because of his cognitive deficits, he did not know that she was deceased. And so by the time the paramedics and everyone got there, my mother had been deceased for approximately 8 hours, but he just thought that she was asleep. And he didn't, at that time, he didn't have the ability to call me or call 911 or anything like that. So he just thought she was asleep. So yeah, my story has been a journey of healing and resetting, more resetting than healing. Because I had to deal with my own grief, but also be a mom, also be a wife, and now be sister mom to my brother. It's been hard.
Yeah.
But with with therapy, I have been able to manage as best way as I can.
Yeah. Oh gosh, my
And
heart is
there's
with
more,
you
but
because
thank you.
yeah, my heart is definitely with you. I think that it's there's so much to say about COVID and being alive during a time of something like this. A lot of us, I think it's probably safe to say most of us never thought that we would experience anything like this. And there's really no explanation as to who was able to fight it off and who wasn't able. But I think, it's just important that we all hold space for everyone who has been affected differently with this thing. And my heart definitely goes out to you and your family. And then the immense strength that it took to, like you said, not only grieve yourself with the losses that you faced, but also take on another child, and then along with your personal, your own family responsibilities of being a mother to your 3 children and a wife and continue working. And so how were you able to, function after that? What did life look like after that?
Well, prior to all of these changes, I was an executive director of one of the leading nonprofits here in the state for children mental health. And I absolutely loved my job. It had me traveling, it had me being in a place of leadership, which I love so much. But after my mother transitioned and after acquiring my brother and going to court and his appointments and just managing his services, I realized that it was a lot for me to maintain a full-time job, maintain the responsibility of upholding my role as an executive director. And what's the word I'm looking for? I find gratification through my work. You know what I mean? Like I love making sure that I meet deadlines and all that type A type stuff. Like that's just who I am.
Oh yeah.
And when I couldn't find that type of gratification, I knew that I wasn't upholding my end of the bargain to my job. I resigned. So that has been like the major shift for me. And then switching over into the entrepreneurial world. So that has been one of the biggest changes for me. And then, like I said, there's more because after, we finally got things settled, we bought a house, the dream house in my definition, it's like the house I always wanted. 3 days after we moved in, 2 sleeps. I always tell people 2 sleeps later, the house caught on fire. And we lost pretty much everything in the fire. So we're currently rebuilding in that aspect, rebuilding our lives in the house. And so we've been displaced for the last 6 months. So yeah, it's been tough.
I I can't even imagine. I can't. All I can do is just, I want to give you like a virtual hug because the immense strength that it is taking to get through the things that you've experienced. But I mentioned we had the, like I said earlier, we had the opportunity to speak on the phone and you told me this, and I just want to I want to say it again, that like when you told me about this beautiful home that you've always wanted, and that was like, you felt like things were turning around, and then you get into this house and then it burns. Literally everything's destroyed. And it makes me think of in the wild, you hear about wildfires and they seem so devastating, but that's when new growth happens. And so that's just the vision that I get for you, is that you went through the fire, like you really went through the fire the last few years. And that was the symbolic, representation for me when I look at your story as new growth, because right now with Reset and Heal, how is that going for you? Tell me about that, because this is some incredible stuff that you're doing.
So Reset and Heal, I am a therapist, and Reset and Heal is a for-profit organization that partners with different organizations, nonprofits, for-profits, whoever need my services. No, I'm just joking. But
Yeah.
but I do.
Whoever
Who shall ever need my service.
Yeah.
I provide clinical support to the organization as they need me, and then I also facilitate groups and workshops and things like that, and conferences. But the main goal is sharing with communities of color, Black and Brown communities, to break down the stigma of mental health, to ensure that everyone has and know that they have a privilege to heal. Because therapy is a privilege. A lot of people don't understand that therapy is a privilege, whether it's an economic privilege, whether it's a time thing, because a lot of therapists may not have their schedule open after 5, but a lot of people can't get off work to go to therapy, So I am able to facilitate those workshops and those group sessions on weekends. And I also do some private stuff with a contract. I'm a contractor with another organization to provide one-on-one. But mainly it's just getting the word out and supporting individuals as it comes. And organizations now need mental health support more than ever, because the same people we were prior to 2019, when this whole thing took flight, this pandemic, we are not the same. We're not the same people.
Right.
And I believe that organizations sometimes think that we are, but we're not. We're not. So, and then also I just give the message about my mom. I like to share the message that, Reset and Heal came because, I hate to say it, but it came through that, my loss. I wouldn't have never stepped out, but it helped me to realize that women of color and women, period. I'm not even going to generalize it and say women of color. I'm saying women, period, that we often put this cape on our back, that we can do it all and be all to everybody. But when it's time to be all for ourselves, we can't show up for ourselves. And that's part of Reset and Heal, is also educating women that, when it's time to show up for ourselves, we need to be strong to be able to do that. And when my mom caught COVID, I just don't think that she was she was strong enough to fight when she needed to fight. And I was just like, you are stronger than this, you can't allow this to take you out. Like, how did this happen? So yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. There's a few things that you've said, some incredible things that I want to touch on. since you mentioned your mom most recently, I want to discuss that. So I wanted to talk about grief and what that looked like for you and how you were able to process that, how you're still processing that. I'm sure I've never experienced a loss like what you've experienced. So for somebody that wants to understand how to be a supportive person, like there's all these things that go along with it. I want to be supportive, but at the same time, like help somebody else that may be experiencing something similar that you went through. What kind of advice would you give to them on how to reset and heal?
Yeah. So, my grief was it was very intense, and it was isolating actually, because unless you've lost someone like your mother, it's very hard for people to relate to such a huge loss like that. And then not lost, lost. So it's it's very hard for people to relate. So it can be very isolating. But for me, like I said, going to therapy was my biggest support, as well as my husband. He allowed me to have my moments of grief. But even he couldn't relate. He can only be as much of a support as he possibly could be. And, I even felt the urge to grieve for my brother, because I knew how close he and my mom were. However, I realized along with my therapist that I couldn't grieve he had to have his own grief journey on his own, whatever that looked like, And for me, I had to totally reset my whole life. So just adjusting to this new way of living for myself was hard. I like the 9 to 5 grind, if you will. So again, this whole entrepreneurial lifestyle, and then having to make meetings for my brother and do things for him, it festered a lot of anger in me, because grief is we have the cycles of grief, but it was more like this, one minute you're grieving, oh gosh, and then the next minute you're angry because of all these changes. So, when I have to sit in appointments, like yesterday, for example, my brother, he's going to the Joy Prom, and it's a prom for special needs adults, and I think teenagers can go too.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
So we went to Men's Warehouse and got him fitted for a suit and everything, and it was grief started to come up. But one thing I know about grief, and for those that are grieving, is that you have to feel grief. Grief is like all the other emotions that we experience: sadness, happiness, fear, all of those things that we welcome. Grief wants that as well. And when you don't feel it, or when you do push it back and like, go away, go, then that's when it becomes a major issue. So I have allowed myself to actually feel grief and actually welcome it when it comes. And that has helped me. And, with the resetting, I have learned that the healing is where the victory is, because you emerge as a new person. You emerge, like you said, out of the fire. Something is brought up beautiful. So with all of that, I welcome the grief that comes. And, for people that experience grief, I would just say, or may have to tread this journey one day, hopefully not in that manner, but to just welcome it. Don't be afraid of it. And a lot of people are. And so they get involved in drinking and smoking and drugs, so that so they won't feel it, But when you wake up in the morning,
it's there. Yeah, almost like it looks for that window. Almost like it looks for that window of opportunity. Okay, there's no suppression going on, so let me try. I think that's such important advice. Like I said, I've never experienced grief on the magnitude that you have, but it just reminds me of I seen a post. It's been probably months now, but one of my previous guests who was on the podcast, Destiny, and I feel like probably almost everybody knows who she is. She is a gentle parent coach, and she experienced the loss of her mother. And she mentioned having these moments where she just allowed herself, like you said, when it comes, like just allow it to happen. Because when you suppress that, not only is it doing your body damage, it's doing your mind damage. And she said that she, if I'm not misquoting her, that she like has the set aside days where she just sits down and she just feels it and she just allows it to come out and process it, because, you know, if you hold it in, it's going to manifest in other ways. Or like you said, if you find unhealthy coping mechanisms, you're just going to spiral down a really bad, dark path. And so I love that you said that. I think it's so important that people realize that it's okay to feel. I know it hurts. Like I understand, like, I don't know, but I understand that shit hurts. And so nobody wants to cry. Nobody wants to feel those emotions. Nobody wants to hurt, but you know, it's an important process. Like you said, I think that's such a beautiful way of saying that just when you feel it, just let it go. Yeah. Gosh. And so, you know, in the way that you have to process that, you're having to also be responsible for your brother who has special needs, who is also an adult at the same time, and trying to help him. What did the grieving look like for him? Did you guys seek therapy for him as well? Because I can't imagine what he has to, you know, trying to process on the ability that he has.
Yeah. So, and with my brother, he has probably had the biggest shift. Like I was able to shift, but with him, it's a little bit harder. He really had to grow up like that. You know, as moms, we protect our babies, you know, and my brother was very, he was very babyish. Like my mom babied him. Okay. That was her baby. We are 12 years apart. So if that gives you any indication of like, okay. And then he had the cognitive, you know, issue. So she just loved that boy. And so I would say for him, he has had to grow up immensely to the point where he has had to get a job. And he don't have to have, let me just put it like this. He didn't have to get a job, but we, you know, as he has progressed through these last 15 months, he works at Zaxby's now. He no longer, he would have a one-on-one with him when he would go to school and things like that. Now he doesn't have a one-on-one because he's able to go to school and actually be a part of the group without causing disruption. What else does he? Oh, he rides the bus to school. And I mean, he's just doing great on the, like, just kind of getting him socialized and things like that. But grief wise, yesterday when we were talking, like he told me that he misses mommy. He called my mom mommy. You know, he misses mommy. He misses rubbing her hand. Like that was his coping skill. He would rub her hand. And he misses that. My grandmother I moved my grandmother up here to stay in the house with him. And we bought a bigger house because, you know, he could have his own space at our house, when he would come over. So, but he still lived in the house that he shared with my mom, and we moved my grandmother up here for her to be closer to us as well. And for me to keep an eye on her. And it can kind of be you know, she's 75 and someone with special needs and generational, it can be difficult for her, you know, just trying to understand all of his needs. So that's two-way adjustment for him. And, we've just we support him, and everybody that is in his village supports him and allow him to express when he wants to express, cry when he wants to cry. But I have also realized that, like I said before, I can't grieve for him. And that was something initially I was doing, and that I can't replace my mother's role with him. And that was also something that I was initially trying to do.
Yeah.
And, trying to, oh, my mom would want it like this, or my mom would have him like this. And I had to realize that I'm not my mom, and this is how I'm going to do it. And we're going to work it the best way we can. And we have, but
Yeah.
he definitely have his struggles from day to day.
Hello, beautiful. I just wanted to pop in here really quick and remind you that if you love what you're hearing and you want to hear more of it, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss next week's episode of I Empower. And if you're feeling extra generous and you would like to give us a review, we would greatly appreciate it. Those help bump us in the algorithm so that more people are able to find these empowering stories to help them. Also, don't forget to check out the art that goes along with today's episode. You can do so at iempower.club or on Instagram at @IEmpowerClub. And if you personally feel connected to the story and the art and you would like to purchase a limited edition print that goes along with it, you can do so on our website. As a reminder, all of the art sales go to support the podcast and help us continue this mission each week of bringing you empowering stories. All right, back to the show. I understand that. I mean, like you said, just trying to navigate the new normal. And I know some people hate that verbiage, but I mean, realistically, it's true. Like you said before, we are not the same people that we were in 2019, like at all. At least for me, I know I can, speaking for myself, but I feel like that's probably a blanket statement for a lot of people. But I think what you're doing is incredible. And I love that he is able to thrive. I love that you're thriving. Would you have any advice for someone who may be on the other end of the grief spectrum as far as being a friend to somebody who is going through grief? I know that there are a lot of things. I made a post about it this week on what not to say and what to say, or what to say, like instead of saying this, say this type situation for someone who is experiencing grief. Would you have any advice on how to be a good friend to someone that may be going through something similar to what you went through?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I can speak for myself in regards to, again, grief will have you all over the place, mentally, physically. I mean, your body takes a hit. And we are connected to our mothers in ways that we're not connected to our fathers because we live inside of our mothers. Right. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, I mean, it's definitely a natural thing that when we lose our moms, it affects our whole psyche and physically too. And when someone is going through, particularly because that's the closest person I've ever lost, accept the changes that come with that person, that person probably will not be the same person ever again.
Right.
And because I know for myself, I was still trying to process how I'm going to live this life without someone that I've been with for all my life. For 35 years of my life, I was with my mom. So now it's like I'm trying to, 15 months later, I'm still trying to process life without her, and then responsibilities as well. So being a good listener is one, but also accepting the changes that may come with the grief. The person may not answer your calls all the time. The person may be a little bit more irritable than they were prior to the loss. The person may want to only talk about the loss of their loved one. that was me. Excuse me. Initially, I just wanted to talk about my mom, and anybody that will talk about her, I'm like, give me more, give me more, you know?
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And that can be, excuse me, that can be very, for the friend, it can be exhausting.
Yeah.
And for my husband, bless his heart, I love that man. For him, it was exhausting at some point, but he's not going to say,
Yeah.
you know, hey, you're wearing me out, you know, can you kind of, you
Right.
know, so just being a good listener, but also being a support in those moments when your friend is probably, you know, wearing you out, because grief, nobody puts a time limit on grief. Um, and everybody grieves differently. So, you
Hmm.
know, check in with the friend that have had the loss. You know, how are you doing?
Yeah.
You know, haven't heard from you in a while, you know, things like that. But definitely just being a strong supporter and a strong listener, and just
Right.
accepting this new person, because the old person that once was is probably no longer. Um,
Right.
yeah, so
Oh,
it's a
yeah. I
very,
think that's, yeah, that's, I mean, that's, I think that's a great advice to give, because I can think of when I'm going through my mental issues, and like you said, bless your husband, bless my husband, because they are excellent listeners. And sometimes I try to remind myself that if I want to, even in moments where I don't know what to say to somebody through what they're going through, I will tell them, I don't even have to like give you advice. I don't even have to say anything. If you just need someone to just talk to, I will be those
mhm,
listening ears, and I don't have to give you, I don't have to say anything. I could just be those ears that are receiving this information that you need to get off of your chest or out of you in some way. And so, like you said, I think that that's such an important thing to highlight with your husband, how he was just there for you to just be
mhm,
you, and all of the beautiful and all of what would some say ugly, you know.
girl.
I think that's perfect advice.
Mhm,
Oh my
mhm.
goodness. So I want to ask you, from a therapist standpoint, you know, processing grief and balancing life and all of that. You mentioned with what you're doing with Reset and Heal is that you're filling the gaps, and
Mhm.
you mentioned having mental health and these types of services accessible, especially for women of color. There's not a lot. I haven't heard a lot of talk about it. I've kind of heard it here and there in the women of color community who speak about the gaps that are there with mental health. Can you tell me the importance of having that accessibility for women like yourself?
Yeah, so it's very important because number one, there is a stigma in the Black and Brown community as it relates to mental health. A lot of women of color, we are perceived or like to be perceived as super women, that we have it all together. But we don't take a lot of time to be able to take care of ourselves. We have this one thing I like to speak of in my workshops, that we have this Superwoman Syndrome that has been
Mm-hmm.
derived all the way back into slavery. And we have to understand that it's okay, like I spoke of earlier, it's okay to take care of ourselves. And it's okay that if something don't get done, if those kids have to eat Pop Tarts and cereal for dinner so that you can chill out, then that's okay, you know. But we
Yes.
have where this 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 instinct that if we don't do it, then it won't get done. And, you know,
Mm-hmm.
my voice is to share that that's not okay. When my mother passed, I literally realized that she was carrying our whole family on her back, you know, from my uncle to my grandmother to my brother, and some sort me, although I, you know, was intentional about not being such, you know, needy of her, but she still was mom. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
So
That don't ever go
um,
away.
that would never go away. And she carried a lot of stuff on her back. So when she passed, it was like the rock was like our anchor was taken from underneath us. So allowing
Yeah.
and sharing with our community that the Superwoman, the Black Strong Woman syndrome, it only hurts us. And going to therapy or participating in some type of self-care, and I'm not talking about self-care and getting your nails done or getting your toes done or getting a massage. Like,
Yeah.
no, we beyond that stuff. I'm talking
Yes.
about actually sitting down with someone and help, finding out, okay, what is the root of all of this? And why do I feel like I have to be the savior or the superwoman in my family? Or why am I feeling like I have to put myself beneath everyone else? So, and
Mm-hmm.
that's just notorious in our community. So, my voice, I'm hoping that I can share with women the importance of putting yourself first. And if that means you have to reset, I don't know what your resetting look like. It may take a death and it may not. It may just be like, you know what, I'm done. Like, everybody just get out,
Yeah, get out.
everybody just go to your room. I don't know
Yep.
what that looked like for you or for anybody, but you have to get back to the landmark, and so that you can heal, so that you can make sure that you are taking care of yourself. So when those storms come, when that illness come, when things come, you're able to guard up your loins and fight. You know what I'm saying? So
Yes,
that's
most
that's
definitely.
that's what I'm talking about, Jessica.
Yeah, because I do hear I'm a part of a mom's group on Facebook, and I have heard the stigma with the Black and brown women,
Mm-hmm.
with mental health and not seeking it and not having access to it and not feeling heard and understood because, every culture's struggles are different. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's why I'm so honored to have the opportunity to speak to you about this, because it never was explained to me in that way. And so I think it's so important that women understand that we do share similarities in the struggles that we face, but also
Mm-hmm.
every culture has their own particular things. And like you said, where yours is rooted from. And when you said it, my eyes just like opened up, and it makes sense to me that
Mm-hmm.
that would be a struggle, but also highlighting the importance of, like you said, we don't have to be super women. We don't have to be, all the time, like, let's
Yeah.
rest some,
Let's
because
rest.
if,
Yeah,
yeah, if
for
you,
sure.
one of my guests has said before, and I think it's an amazing, amazing quote that, if I give all of me, there will be none of me left. And so I think it's important that
So
we
true.
understand that. And
So true.
so with Reset and Heal, if someone is looking, like, do you offer a space where if someone's like, I feel like maybe I need to let me take a look into this. Do you help people find therapists or communities that they feel like they fit into for this type of thing?
Absolutely. So, one thing that I share on my Facebook, which is Reset and Heal Consulting, I post different therapists or practices that have openings, and those particular therapy offices or practices are ran by therapists of color, because a lot of
Mm.
individuals that are, Black and brown, they want to be able to sit down in front of someone that looks like them, that is culturally competent.
Yes.
So, and there's not a lot out there. So one thing that Reset and Heal does is we promote businesses. We promote clinicians that are of color, so that the community is aware that, hey, there are therapists out there that look like you. So that is a barrier,
Yes.
but there are therapists out there that look like you. So I'm often posting on the Reset and Heal Consulting Facebook as well as Instagram page to highlight those clinicians that are of color and that are currently seeking. Now, as in regards to Reset and Heal, I do offer support groups for women, and so far it has been only for women, but I am going to kind of venture into the men, because men too have their own
Yeah.
struggles. But in
Mm-hmm.
May, every Saturday in May, I will be facilitating a group called Permission Granted, and it's for women. It don't have to be women of color, but it's for women. And it's basically permission granted is granting yourself the same permission that you give others, giving that back to you. So mirroring yourself on someone else. You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh, so powerful.
Allowing yourself to feel, allowing yourself to be able to understand that it's okay if you just drop the rope for an hour and a half and just be amongst other women who probably feel the same way that you do, and you're not by yourself in this. So I'm excited about that.
Oh my God. Yes. Oh my gosh. Like that quote right there that you just said about, it hit me. Mm-hmm. We are so, we try to be empathetic and be that person for someone else, that we get caught up in being that way for someone else, that we lose. We don't do it for ourselves. Like we're like, okay, here's all this. Let me help you with all this. Yes. And here I am. But then when it comes time to like help ourselves be who we are as a friend to ourselves, like we don't do it for some reason. And so I love that.
We don't give ourselves the same grace that we give others. And it's time that we do that, especially in this pandemic era where we have been homeschooling these babies and taking care of X, Y, Z. It's like, girl, let's just give yourself the grace. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I know I've heard a lot of talk about, not saying anything towards the men, but, us women, we worked and we schooled our kids and we cooked and we cleaned and we kept doing all of the things that, all the things that we did before, the men still did their normal thing, even if they were working at home, it was still, and because we feel that responsibility that even though that like our lives were completely, I feel like flipped upside down, we still felt like we had to hold on to that like sense of like the way that it's supposed to be and take on this extra thing of schooling our children and them being home all the time. And I think everybody probably needs therapy after that. Oh my God.
Yes,
I thought I was doing good. I was used to working at home. And then when my oldest, when they went virtual and, the schools are trying to like navigate through that because they had no idea what they were doing. And I had no idea what I was doing. And I was like, I can't be with you and be working at this. Like, how do I do this? Oh my God. So
horrible.
Yeah. So definitely it's time. It is well time that we start taking care of ourselves and giving ourselves grace and just, like you said, take that freaking cape off, man. It doesn't have to be on there all the time. So, and I love that you mentioned too, I just want to highlight again the fact that you're coordinating where people can find therapists that resemble themselves, that look like them. And I didn't even know that you could do that until I spoke to a therapist last season. She mentioned that you can pick your gender, you can pick your age range, you can pick, if there's any specific things, religious beliefs or lack thereof that are important to you. And like you said, the color, the female, the male, like that is so important that we realize that we can find people that we know we're going to feel comfortable around. Because ultimately your therapist needs to be somebody that feels like a friend that you can confide into. And so I love that you mentioned that. I think that's so important for women to understand, men too, but especially trying to break those barriers and those stigmas with the women of color community. So I love that you said that. So yes, if anybody's listening and they're like in their local, because we're local to each other, and you're like, that sounds like something I'm interested in, definitely check out. I will link all of Alexia's social media and all of the links, websites, and all that good stuff so that you guys can see that in the show notes. But yeah. Amazing stuff you're doing. Oh my gosh.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So do you have, I do have a few questions that I want to ask you that I like to ask all my guests. So if you're ready, we'll jump right into those.
Let's go.
What would be the best piece of advice that you would give a younger version of yourself who was in the thick of struggle if you had a few moments with them?
I would tell her, and this is something that I've been resonating with for a very long time, so I'm glad you asked, that you are enough. You are enough. That's that is like it. You are enough.
Yeah.
I can't even expound on that. I think that is a complete
Yeah.
sentence
It's
with a
that
with a
simple.
period. You are enough.
Yeah. That's it. I love it. Fantastic. I think we all can definitely benefit from just that simple sentence. You are enough. My last question, that is my favorite question, is we like to talk about power and not thinking of that as a bad thing. How would you describe, or how would you think of the type of power that you try to step into every day?
So my power, what kind of power, you kind of went out at the end, what kind of power that I
Okay.
possess?
Yeah, like what do you try the type, how do you describe, or how do you think of the type of power that you try to step into every day?
Oh, yeah. So the power that I step into, that's a good one, Jessica. Um, whew, the power to smile, sparkle, and shine. While doing all of that, empowering others to do the same. Just having that
Yeah.
power to share my lived experience and how I'm able to still smile, how I'm able to still sparkle and share all my glitter, my mental health magic, as well as
Yes.
shine in the midst of it. And I'm so grateful that I don't look like what I've been through, So that's my power.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. It has been such an honor talking to you and sharing your incredible story with all of my listeners. I know the future is holding some incredible things for you, and I just can't wait to sit back and watch and see how more you blossom, how much more you blossom. Thank you, Alexia, for being on today. It's been an absolute honor.
Thank you for having me, Jessica. I appreciate being on your podcast.
I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in today. I want to thank my guests again for sharing their incredible story of transformation with us. I have linked their social medias below in the show notes so that you can give them a follow through their journey. Also, don't forget to check out the art that goes along with each week's episode at iampower.club. If you personally feel connected to the art and you would like to purchase a limited edition print that goes along with it as your own reminder to step into your power, you can do so at our website. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at iampowerclub, on TikTok at iampowerclub, and of course, YouTube at iampower. And don't forget to like and subscribe so that you don't miss next week's episode of I Am Power. See you then.